This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on Bharat Ratna Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the man and his vision. The participants are K.S. Sachidanand Murthy, political analyst, and Vinay Kumar, journalist.
India observes death anniversary or Mahaparinirvan Divas of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, as he is fondly called, is considered to be the chief architect of India's constitution. He is our nation's icon, and not only chief architect of constitution, but he strived for a society which is based on justice and equality. This morning, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said in a tweet that he is remembering the great Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar on his Mahaparinirvan Divas. His thoughts and ideas will continue to give strength to millions, Prime Minister said, and he also said that we are committed to fulfilling the dreams he had for our nation. Similar sentiments were also echoed by the country's first citizen, President Ramnath Kovind, who talked about his economic and social justice and equality of opportunities for which Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar fought throughout his life. By all angles and by all opinions, Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar is considered to be, Masiha of Dalits and scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, but he was much more than that. Mr. Murthy, if we look at Dr. Ambedkar's contribution as who headed the drafting committee, and this drafting committee gave our constitution, which is hailed a historic document and is unique in the world.
Every input he gave, equality and social justice, they were lived experiences for him. It's not that he had read them in the textbooks. Whether it was an issue of caste discrimination, untouchability, or discrimination in employment, then later difficulties faced by many of the people whom those era were called from the depressed classes, who could not get an opportunity even to walk on the same street as the upper caste people, or to so many inequalities were there and opportunities have been. And he himself had lived through all that from his childhood in Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, when he served in a princely state in the present-day Gujarat. So he had seen it personally, and he had heard the experiences of tens of thousands of people who had gone through this. And then his education in India and abroad and his practice as an advocate, it gave him fine insights into these issues, and then he was able to prescribe what is needed to bring in equality and social justice in its multiple myriad heads. That's why the Constitution is the lengthiest one in the world. Even if you take only the section of it which deal with equity, justice, freedoms and other things, those sections are very substantive, because Ambedkar said that time that, yes, I want everything to be spelled out as clearly as possible, because we are also integrating laws from many, many streams which have come, whether it was from the British India or the Mughal India and then princely India. So he wanted a constitution which will serve from one end of this nation to the other end without its locally getting corrupted or polluted. So that was one of the great contributions he could make, because it was a lived experience which came through in this constitution.
There are some, amazing facts about Dr. Ambedkar, that he did his master's in 64 subjects, knew 9 languages, and had studied across the world for 21 years. He is the first and only person in the world to receive a valuable doctorate degree named Doctor All Science from the London School of Economics, and he completed 8 years of studies in just 2 years, 3 months at London School of Economics. While he was a revolutionary Dalit activist, Dr. Ambedkar, he was also the one who had proposed the division of Madhya Pradesh and Bihar for development of these states. But Mr. Murthy, I would like to ask you, I was looking at what Nobel laureate Dr. Amartya Sen said about Dr. Ambedkar. He described him as a truly celebrated champion of the underprivileged. He said he deserves more than what he has achieved today because of the economic principles which were enunciated by Dr. Ambedkar. He was an economist as well, economist, philosopher, thinker, parliamentarian, country's first law minister, reformer, strong supporter of women's rights, masiha of workers, peasants, poor and Dalits. Little known facts about his economic philosophy. If you could talk about what his economics stood for apart from social justice and equality.
He was a genius who had studied everything possible. The time he was a school student, this academic excellence, his ability to absorb and not just, do by rote, by just memorization. but questioning things and hearing great reformers and others talk about these things. So for him, he reveled in the company of great people like Jyotiba Phule is a social reformer, Savitribai Phule, his wife, who did so much work for emancipation of women. So, as you rightly noted, he studied across continents and universities. He met the finest minds. He read the finest things. But everything he put into use, questioned it, and his doctoral thesis was on the rupee in British India. His doctoral dissertation had a far-reaching recommendation which were valid much beyond the period on which he wrote about, because when the Indian rupee was devalued in the late 1960s, people were remembering the work of Dr. Ambedkar on the rupee and said that if only what Dr. Ambedkar had prescribed at that time, what the route he had said about currency management and related devaluation of the rupee wouldn't have been necessary. So I'm just giving one example of his thinking and his work. Similarly, on the manufacturing and productivity, on how agriculture should be reformed and used to generate employment and income. While we are all celebrating and going by what he did for social justice in terms of untouchability, providing opportunities in education, employment and electoral representation for the depressed sections, but his other contributions, and as you rightly noted, he was the one first to say that large states need to be broken into smaller administrative units also, because he felt that the kind of inherent inbred feudalism there could also be eliminated and modernism could come in, where there will be more urbanization, more opportunities. So heavy dependence on land for a large population like that of India would be very counterproductive. It can't happen. And that only happened after the 1991 reforms, when large-scale employment generation happened in the private sector and then also consequently the public sector employed. So I think he was a visionary in all aspects, social, electoral, educational, cultural and economic. So I think we have to revisit Ambedkar on many of these things. All his writings, all his speeches are available, but I think we have to look at not just as an icon whom we remember on his birth and death anniversaries, but somebody who can be constantly applied to the evolving situations, even of the 21st century. He is very, very relevant.
It's not only that his vision of a society based on liberty, equality and fraternity, as you rightly pointed out, that we should just commemorate and remember on his birth anniversary and death anniversary, but he remains, his principles and his teachings and whatever he stood for remains relevant even to this date. UNDP's top official of the United Nations at a function a couple of years ago in India's permanent mission, he said that Ambedkar's tireless efforts towards ensuring excluded groups was politically and socially empowering them, made him a pioneer in the world, and his vision of equality and social justice echoes ambitions of the UN's 2030 development agenda. They are drawing upon whatever he said, equality of opportunity and lot of access, critical to Dr. Ambedkar's vision of development for all, and what is at the heart of 2030 agenda for sustainable development, which the UN has given a call for. So he remains relevant not only for India, but I think for the world at large.
You are right, because like visionary Mahatma Gandhi, what Ambedkar said and wrote and spoke and did achieve was relevant not just for India but for across the world. We have heard a lot of politicians and officials and activists in the United States of America talking about how Ambedkar's vision of social justice in the Indian Constitution would have been a better way of dealing with the fault lines in American society, which again manifested this year in widespread riots and the Black Lives Matter movement. So they were recalling that Ambedkar's teachings on these issues were very, very relevant across the world. And as we see more of religious and tribal differences cropping up in Africa or in Europe and all these big democracies and dictatorships, Ambedkar's policies worked. He was one of those who insisted. There were some members of the drafting committee who said, should we have universal franchise or should we again go for graded franchise? He argued that no, that is the only way we'll remain a democracy, that India will always resist dictatorial trends, because if every Indian has felt that he had a responsibility and right in the republic. So I think this is one of his great, he remains relevant, which happens to few visionaries in the world.
He drafted in 1936 Annihilation of Caste, his doctrine. It was an undelivered speech where he argued for the annihilation of the caste system and caste-based division of labor. And according to him, the caste system has destroyed the concept of ethics and morality. And all human beings are equal. That is what he said in that. And by dehumanization of the downtrodden people, that was unacceptable. Apart from this, his vision about equality and fraternity and liberty, what is being echoed, as you rightly pointed out, in not only in South Asia and India, but in the most developed countries like the US, where we have seen these struggles still going on and protests and agitations of Black Lives Movement.
Annihilation of caste is one of the finest pieces of social philosophy, which was very right. But unfortunately, what has happened is, without understanding what Ambedkar said on caste, even those who profess to be his followers, who have floated political parties in name, and every political party in India swears by the name of Ambedkar, there's a lot of encouragement being given to casteist feelings in the country. Everywhere, caste identity is becoming more and more manifest, more and more acute. That is leading to a lot of tensions, whereas what Ambedkar had said in that essay was how to say that, yes, caste remains within your house. Outside, we are all equal. That means once we are equal outside the house, then our productivity increases, our harmony increases, our own standards go up. So the benefits of a non-casteist approach and thinking, he had advocated at that time. He also advocated very, very rigorous steps to be taken to annihilate caste, because he said it had died Indians very viscerally for centuries. So that idealism which he had advocated, that idealism to be achieved in very practical methods, unfortunately many people who are even claimed to be his followers are not doing that. It's a disservice to the vision and ideals of Ambedkar.
I'm tempted to ask you, has Dr. Ambedkar been misunderstood, or he's not been understood properly by the political parties or by the thinkers or by the reformists in our country?
I have a feeling that wherever convenient, Ambedkar has been used. Wherever convenient, his philosophies have been borrowed and used. But what had happened was, but one good thing is, some of his great philosophies, the same visions and articulations on social justice, equality, very proper representation in education, services and elected bodies in the country, I think that was accepted very well. But otherwise, other principles of his either have been ignored or have not been done justice with. I think there's a sort of compartmentalized use of the holistic vision of Ambedkar, which is not doing full service to a genius of Ambedkar's nature. That is the words what I feel, that we could have benefited much more from Ambedkar than so far we have benefited.
As you rightly said, wherever convenient, Ambedkar's principles and his teachings have been recalled, but holistic vision about what Dr. Ambedkar stood for and he struggled throughout his life has not been implemented.
I think we should not lose hope that newer generations and newer responsible leaders or the educated class, they will all appreciate much more, because again, Ambedkar said when we make religion the center of everything and without appreciating the true meaning of religion, what harm it can cause. So again, I hope all will be understood, because he remains relevant. Consciously or by a vote discarded him, these particular facets of his contribution. Only thing is they are being either ignored or being conveniently used. So I think wait for the next generation of political and administrative, social, economic leadership to take up and do things.
Mr. Murthy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on Bharat Ratna Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the man and his vision.